crunchy, salty, sometimes sweet, and very flavorful. That's right, I'm describing America's #1 snack, the potato chip. The potato chip was founded by a chef, a minority chef actually, in a small town in New York. Today I'm going to be giving you just a little bit of a look in the life of George Crum. From the start of his culinary career to the invention of potato chips, the opening of his restaurant, and the end of his legacy and the beginning of others. George Crum was born in 1822 in Saratoga Springs, New York. He was born to Catherine Speck, a Huron Indian, and Abraham Speck, an African American. His sister, Katie, also known as Auntie Katie. George grew up in Saratoga Springs. His father worked as a jockey at the Saratoga Springs racetrack. George later changed his last name to Crum, which was his father's jockey name. George worked various jobs as a young man. He was a trapper and an Adirondack hunter. George would go out and he would fish and he would hunt and he would catch his game, and then he would take it back to upstate New York and sell it to the hotels for money. George also worked as an Adirondack tour guide for the mountains. It was here at the Adirondack resorts that George embraced his culinary career. George later landed a job working as a chef at a high-class restaurant, Moon's Lake House Restaurant. It was here that the potato chip was born. It was a hot summer day in 1863 when Katie and George were working in the back kitchen of the Lake Moon's House Restaurant, and a famous guest by the name of Cornelius Vanderbilt came in to enjoy dinner. He ordered the French fries, and when his French fry dish came out, he complained that the French fries were cut too thick, so he sent the plate back. This was common behavior for most guests at the restaurant. So when George received the plate back, he was just plain fed up. So he decided to get a potato, cut it as thin as he could, fry it in really hot oil and fry it as hard as he could. Then he took the chips out, he poured tons and tons of salt on it, and he sent the dish back out to Mr. Cornelius. George for sure thought that this was going to upset the guest, but to George's surprise, Mr. Vanderbilt was so in love with the potato chips. George's potato chips became a hit. Everyone would come to the restaurant and ask for George's famous potato chips. George later opened a restaurant in 1860 in Malta, New York of his own. The restaurant was a family affair. He not only had his wife and his children and his mother and his father working for him, he also had his extended family working there for him. At every table in the restaurant was a basket of potato chips, which was George's little unique touch to his very own restaurant. George's restaurant was open for 30 years, and it served the wealthy and the famous. George is rumored to have 5 wives. Of these 5 wives, only one was documented, Miss Hester Bennett. George had 3 kids, Richard, George Jr., and Cynthia Crum. George died in July 1914 in his hometown, Saratoga Springs, New York. Although George did die, his legacy did not die with him. A man by the name of William Tappendone of Cleveland, Ohio, decided to sell potato chips in a grocery store in 1895, which began the mass production of potato chips. Estelle Woods Wilcox of Indiana also sold her recipe internationally in the 1870s. There are several people documented that took the potato chip to the level of popularity that it has now. But where would they be without George? An African-American Indian mixed young man whom started his culinary career at a young age unintentionally invented the potato chip, opened his own restaurant, and started a legacy. Those are just the high points of George's life. Although his great invention was not intentional, I, for one, am happy that it came about, because where would I be without a great wavy bag of potato chips? Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, ma'am. What did you find most interesting when researching George Crum?
I found it most interesting that the invention of the potato chips was actually a mistake. George was trying to upset the guest, but in turn it actually made the guest even more happy and it became a hit.
Right. What would you say George's biggest influence was, or his biggest inspiration towards his success?
Well, from George working as a young man in the culinary skills, I think that once he just started cooking his first time at the resorts, he just fell in love with cooking, and that's what he wanted to do. He invented that potato chip, unintentional, but then it also helped him to open up his own restaurant where he could help his family to start a legacy that he started.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed your speech.
Thank you.
Thank you.